Jessica Crow. I'm the founder of APMG and the host of Change Leader Insights, and I'm very excited. I have Melanie Franklin here with me today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and it'll make sense why she's on this podcast because her background, her expertise is so well suited for what we're going to be talking about. She is a chartered management consultant. She is a chief examiner for the Neuroscience for Change and Agile Change qualifications at APMG International. She's the founder of the Change Capability Community and the originator of the annual Global Change Capability Survey. That is not all. She is the author of 10 books. She's working on her 11th. I think the most recent was the Neuroscience for Change at Work, Practical Insights to Overcome Workforce Resistance to Organizational Change. So clearly, she is made for this podcast. Her background, Melanie, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to be speaking with you today. I know I gave a little bit of who you are, but tell everyone who's listening, watching, how did you get to where you are today? A little bit about your origin story.
Well, I've been doing what I do for about 30 years. I joined an investment bank straight out of college and realized I was so ill-suited to the world of high finance. I lasted about a year. But what really excited me was the projects that were happening to improve the bank. A lot of them were technology projects, process reorganization. And I just thought, this is something I can really get into. So I sort of transferred to becoming a business analyst. I did that only for a couple of years before they asked me to be a project manager. Then a few years later, I took on multiple projects as a program manager. At the time, there really wasn't much written about program management and the guide for program management. So I wrote one of my first books was about implementing the Prince2 project management methodology. And straight after that, I wrote a practical guide to program management that was a big seller. So my writing career sort of mirrored in a way my experiences that I was having. So I continued taking on very large scale global programs, working usually 30, 40, 50 different countries simultaneously.
Wow.
So those big rollouts of system and process change. But one of the things that really caught my eye was that we were very good at the tangible change. And by that, I mean deciding how we were going to work. This is the system, this is the data, this is the process. But everybody being caught in the slipstream of that, there was no help or support, really. It was just, well, start working differently then. Start using the system. And I thought there has got to be a better way. And at the time, there was a new piece of work being done by the exam board APMG International to bring a new change course to the party. I'd been helping with the program management qualification, and it had talked about as you bring multiple projects together, you will have to think about how you transition from the old to new ways of working. And it gave you guidance on what to do pre-transition, during, and after. It didn't tell you how, it told you what, not how. So I moved across into much more into behavior change. And in my career, that has meant that I started with, okay, let's look at the basic models, things like Kotter's 8 steps, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's transition curve, William Bridges' work. But now I think over the last few years, we've drawn much more. I started with Agile probably about 15 years ago, because that was about chunking up change. Then I was drawn much more into positive psychology. I'd had a look at emotional intelligence with Professor Daniel Goleman, and then starting to bring now in neuroscience. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm thinking, well, this makes perfect sense. Surely we need to understand how the brain reacts. Because I think there's an awful lot in the world of project, program, and change management, a lot of stakeholder engagement, which is about what's your job title? What's your role? What are you responsible for? I will give you this information and it will excite you. I'm not sure that holds true. It certainly doesn't hold true in much flatter organizations, where that hierarchical piece doesn't make any sense at all. And we're working in much flatter structures with much more cross-functional working. But I don't think it works anyway, because to tell you you need certain information and this will motivate you,
Yeah.
ignores the obvious. You are being affected by multiple other changes at
Yes.
home and at work. Surely we should start to think about your brain will process information in a certain way. There are triggers, we know what they are for
Hmm.
good and bad reactions. Maybe if I understood that, I could tailor my message far more effectively.
Yeah, not only tell you your message, but also your own decision making on how you approach the implementation of the change. Let's talk a little bit more about that positive, negative, the threats versus rewards. So for someone who this is the first time that they've heard about that, how our brain reacts to change, can you explain a little bit more about what that process looks like, or some of the threat versus reward experience that happens?
Well, the simple thing is that the brain is there to protect us, to keep us alive. And so the brain is very good at looking for risks and potential threats.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, that is the focus of the brain. We are far quicker at calculating the negatives of any situation than we are at finding the positives.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in this, Professor Alison Ledgerwood at University College Davis in the US is, I just think she's brilliant with the research she comes out with. But the key thing is that the brain will always look for the difficulties and the reasons
Mm-hmm.
why not to change than it will to go, oh, we should change. So if you recognize that as a definite impediment to change,
Mm-hmm.
it also means that the brain is about 3% of our body weight, but uses about 20% of our oxygen. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a very sort of power hungry piece.
Mm.
So the brain sensibly tries to reduce the amount of power it needs. That, in simple terms, is habit. Because what the
Yeah,
brain likes is, I've done this before, I'm going to do it again. And so the brain likes to work on old patterns because
yeah.
it doesn't require any growth, it doesn't require any extra energy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where habits come from. That's where biases come from, actually,
Mm-hmm.
because we'll always use the shortcuts we've used before. So change threatens that trigger as well, because the brain's
Makes
going, well,
sense.
this is new. I don't know how to do this. This will require energy. I don't know if I can be bothered. And
Right,
so there's a lot about the brain. It circles back on uncertainty and says, well, uncertainty, there's a lot of effort involved, but also there could be threats.
right.
It's like change is a dark tunnel. You wouldn't walk in there because you don't know what could happen to you. So, I'll wait and see if other people go in and survive before I will. So
That
the brain really does protect us from the unknown, and change is the
is the
unknown.
unknown. So understanding that, you mentioned how we can craft messages that help people process or experience that process maybe more quickly so they can get to the other side of being interested. What is like, how would somebody who is leading others through change move through that process of helping their teams recognize the fear state, their natural brain tendencies, and overcome that? How would how would you coach somebody through that process, or consult, I should say?
I think there's lots of techniques, and in fact, the latest book is all about practical techniques,
Mm-hmm.
simple things we can do that will meet the needs of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if we recognize that the brain gets comfort from certainty,
Mm-hmm.
why do we talk about change first? Why don't we emphasize these are all the things that are staying the same?
Right.
It's this little bit that's changing. If you put it in the context of much greater stability, if you like, which the brain
Right.
is going, oh, that's good, stability, oh, I feel calm,
Yeah.
then the brain is more willing to listen to the smaller piece about, okay, well, maybe that would, okay, that's okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
Another very simple thing to think about is we talk about autonomy or empowerment, but
Mm-hmm.
that's actually very important to the brain because, again, the brain has a view nobody will protect you more than
Mm-hmm.
your own brain. So if I'm in control, then
Mm-hmm.
I can choose things that are good for me. So, a very simple question to ask yourself whenever you're trying to get people to change is, how much can you empower them? Because
Right.
as soon as they are in the driving seat of their lives, you've got rid of the threat. Oh, you might be doing something awful to me, because they are
Right.
doing it to themselves. So
Yeah.
it's there are simple triggers. And as soon as we start to unpack those, you think, okay, yeah, this really works. This makes complete sense. And I think that's in my career, I have spent a lot of time doing personal development. I never stop. I
Yeah.
not only write books and create exams, I also take courses. I was at an event for a week in June where I was with a whole load of industry experts and thought leaders. I was exhausted by the end of it, but it's that constant stretch. And I
Yeah.
think I can see the pattern in how change is evolving. We are now at this point where actually understanding the basics of how the brain works is probably the bit we really want to get to,
Yes.
particularly in the world of artificial intelligence. Because if we're talking about artificial intelligence, maybe this is the time to brush up on understanding what human intelligence actually is.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's really interesting actually to think about it in that context. I mean, I'm sure you've thought about it then. So as we've got artificial intelligence playing a bigger role in our lives and our ways of working, and now, this call to action is how do we think about our human intelligence and understanding the brain? What are some of the opportunities? We've talked about a few, but like what are some other opportunities that people who are full-time change practitioners or are developing skills, professionally developing to grow as leaders? What are some opportunities you see here for people who are interested in learning more or want to just be more effective in their current roles?
I think that what we can't replace with artificial intelligence is we can't replace human relationships and
Mm-hmm.
engagement, genuine empathy, a
Mm-hmm.
genuine trusted relationships where you can ask anything, where you can get help and support. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we need to move into emphasizing that actually is a key part of what we need to deliver in change. You can provide people with information about the change, but if instead you and I sat down for 10 minutes and I asked you how you were feeling, what are you worried about? What support can I give you? I've accelerated your
Absolutely.
speed of adoption. I can give you
Absolutely.
all of that information and I hope sometime you'll read it. But I'm already up against just how many other things that you're involved in at work. Whereas face to face, concentrating on each other for a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
having a back and forth where you can raise things that you're thinking about. I can provide real life answers, experiences, examples. I can provide you with the right resources that are tailored to your experience because I'm a human and you're a human and we're working together.
Yeah, that makes a lot
That
of
really does
sense.
speed it up. Yeah.
In your experience, recognizing too that so much of how we work, or for many workers, we do this over video, right? We do this over, video. And I think about what kind of impact is there a difference between having a conversation like you and I are over Zoom, for example, or in person? How does the brain react or respond? Is there a difference between the two? And as leaders, should they be thinking about, okay, if there's a big change that's coming down the pike, what type of connection should I be building? Is having a virtual connection sufficient, or can I accelerate this process by doing something literally face to face? Have you encountered that in your experience? Yeah.
Yes, I think looking back over the data, but also looking at our own experiences in the shift to more hybrid working over the last 5 years, if we look at how the brain operates, the most important thing that you and I are getting from this session right now
Mm-hmm.
is we're getting this idea of body language. So the brain orientates towards a human face. There are experiments to show how quickly a baby only a few minutes old will orientate towards pictures of human faces and away from even very coloured, sparkly images.
Interesting.
The baby can't turn much, but the eyes turn towards human face. So certainly being able to read each other's body language, very, very important. So it isn't enough just to have the camera off. It is
Right.
about getting the whole experience. Albert Morabian, Dr. Albert Morabian in Tel Aviv University in 1972 wrote about this. We probably all know these statistics. He talked about 7% of what we communicate is the words that we use, about a third is the tone of voice, and then the remaining 2/3 is all about the body language. Recent neuroscience would indicate that actually he was right, but the body language is an even greater proportion than even
Right.
he identified. So that's the first thing I would say, is that there is no problem at all in having this virtual engagement, because the quality of video now,
Right.
but that willingness to put your camera on. And I think I did a lot of sessions during COVID where it was about talking of, put your camera on. You, if you want to blur the screen, you can do, but maybe just show your house. Maybe get people to know this is me. If I turn my camera down to the floor here, people would see that I have an extremely large dog with a broken leg who I'm nursing, and who has to stay with me all the time because otherwise he eats his bandages.
Right.
You get to know, oh, she rescues animals. Yes, I do. You get to know a little bit about me. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with this virtual exchange. But there's always a but, isn't there? One
Hmm.
of the things that we notice is that we have planned this conversation. This was scheduled. We'd agreed an agenda. What is missing when we do virtual, what is harder to recreate, is if you were sat on that other desk over in my office here and we were working together and just chatting every now and again, and we went and got a drink and we came back, and you know, we would just have those in the moment
Right.
exchanges of
Organic.
information
Hmm.
that you can't plan for, that you can't always remember to ask all of your questions in one big heap. You won't necessarily have all the range of emotions that perhaps need support in a 1 hour booked formal meeting. And
Right.
I think that's the balance we have to get, is that recognition. And I work on global programs, so believe me, I know how incredibly difficult this is.
Hmm.
Um, but there is something about how do we mimic that more in the moment piece. I know with a colleague, for example, that sometimes what we'll do is we'll get on a call like this, we will have a chat, and then we'll say, let's just leave this running. And if we need each other, we can look up. So it kind of mimics
Oh
if you
yeah.
were sat at the other desk, because it's being brain smart. It's knowing that I might be working on something, I'm writing away, and there's something I've got this question. Oh, I can just throw it across the room to you, and
Right.
you're there. You are virtually in my office. I am virtually in your office. So things
Yeah.
like that, where you have those open calls, can be incredibly effective if
I can see
everybody's
that.
happy to agree. And it's the sort of thing that mirrors real life, because maybe after an hour or so, I say, I'm just going to go and get a coffee. And you'll say, oh, I'm just going to go and get a coffee.
Hmm.
And we might say, oh, should we meet back here and drink our coffee together? Or sometimes I've even done it where I've moved, because it's a Teams call on the phone. And
Yeah.
while I'm making my drink, we're chatting away just like we would if we were in the office kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Inconsequential things about whether or not I should have a chocolate biscuit and whether it's healthy. Stuff that's got
Right.
nothing to do with work, but is exactly what we would do if we were together.
Right.
So, it's thinking about how does that work? But first and foremost, the brain wants to see the body
Yep.
language. It picks up so many signals. You're nodding at the moment. You nodded a little bit faster. You put a lot more into the nodding. Uh, you're trying to make eye contact. I'm making eye contact.
Yeah.
So the brain is picking up, oh, that's acceptance, or what I'm saying is being warmly regarded, or I feel more trust with you now, therefore I'm more able to share more. Or perhaps you would
Right.
sort of fold your arms because you're thinking about something. I would know to say, oh, what do you think about that then, Jessica?
Yeah.
It's the
So
brain definitely wants body language more than anything.
that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for explaining that. I think that's going to be helpful for anyone who is in either in person or not. Those are some really great tips and ideas on how to build that connection and create trust in a safe space. And it got me thinking about this idea of psychological safety and how that is important. And what you've already described really does feed into this, but our orientation or our readiness for change, having that experience of being psychologically safe, you can build that in a remote or virtual or in-person environment. I think it's for me, how important it is for people who are in positions of leading others that they create that type of environment if they want to be able to accelerate change, and how small gestures, folded arms, facial expressions can really deteriorate that experience. And I don't know if people are thinking about that maybe as much as they should be. So,
What interests me about psychological safety is that I still work with senior leaders who think that it's all a bit of a nonsense.
yeah, right.
Um, Empowerment is not a word that excites them. I think they see
Mm-hmm.
that as quite threatening. And so I use my understanding of how the brain works to make the business case for these things. Um, for example, when I trust you more and you trust me more, as you speak, because I'm thinking you're part of my tribe now, my
Mm-hmm.
defenses go down. I am less likely to interrupt you. I am more likely to take on board what you're saying. I am far less defensive if you're trying to give me feedback,
Mm-hmm.
if I feel that we trust each other. Something else that happens, though, is that actually we can be far more creative. We
Yes.
can be more open because we'll share more information, but also my brain isn't having to process the fear factor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not processing the threat. So it's actually got more sort of room, if you like, to take in more information, to cross check that information, make connections, and have more insights.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, the creativity, I would use creativity, but in the boardroom, I would probably talk about innovation because that's
Right.
another watchword. It is a more innovative situation the more we trust each other. So
Yes.
again, we come back to what do change people do? Well, actually, they build the environment for innovation and growth.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's such an important message to hear. One more question for you. That thank you, by the way. I feel like I'm learning a lot through this process. So thank you so much. What is on the horizon? I know you're working on another book. What's we've talked about neuroscience for change. You've got so for anyone who's listening and watching, I'll include in the show notes where to find all of your books, because you've got program, project, change, agile change, neuroscience. I mean, that's a whole wealth of information. What's next? Like, what should leaders be thinking about beyond this? Like, what's coming down the pike for you, and why does that excite you?
I think what's coming down the pipe is, I think we're only at the start of the neuroscience journey.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say understanding how humans engage with information, how humans make decisions, how humans react to different sort of triggers. That absolutely, we've only just scratched the surface. That's why I'm already starting to talk about emotional intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that it is, we have to be intelligent. We have to have an intelligent response with each other. So I
Right.
think understanding how the brain works naturally leads you to emotional intelligence, investing in how you behave that gets the most out of people, including yourself,
Right.
rather than perhaps gets the least out of people, because you know that you're pushing their buttons in all the wrong ways. And you know that if you were sort of slightly better behaved, that you could probably have a better relationship. So I think there's all of the practical things that we can do. I'm not talking here about theoretical knowledge because that's fantastic. And if you're interested, it's great. But like in the Neuroscience for Change book, about 1/3 of it is explaining how the brain works. The other 2/3 is lots of practical activities and examples to enable you to do, not just know. And I bring that up because I think that is also a key theme. I talk to a lot of heads of learning and development, and increasingly with the time pressures people have and how fast moving everything is, we have shifted much more to, I need to give you a technique for how to do that. You get why it's important and it will help you. So now let's move you straight into how can you build that capability. The big theory and where's it all come from, that more contextual piece, to be honest, if you're interested, look it up in your own time, but otherwise we're just going to give you what you need in the moment.
Right.
So I think whatever is coming down the track for me, it's right within the context of where we are now. We have never had as much change as we have now, but we will never have as little as we have now, because tomorrow it gets more. I mean, the number of CEO surveys that I have read in the last 6 months alone, which all point to the same thing, which is the number of initiatives that CEOs saying we're going to commission, the number of CEOs into the 80 percentile who are going to increase the amount of business transformation that they are currently conducting in their firms. And yet many of us recognize that we're very close to burnout. And that people are spread so thin already. There is nothing in any of these surveys and nothing in the conversations I have with people about saying no, stopping things, parking things. So I think we have to look at what we're learning and what we're doing in the context of people are overwhelmed. So perhaps understanding how the brain works isn't just about accelerating their ability to get on board with change. Perhaps we can think about how we can use our knowledge of how the brain works to stop more things, to have the ability to say, no, not now.
Yeah. It's like a different responsibility. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What you're describing sounds like taking personal responsibility as a leader and recognizing everything that you're describing and taking different action than we do today. And that is, I love that message. I hope people who are listening and watching hear that and start to think about what you're saying on a deeper level, which almost is a bit of self-awareness too. So it's like, but now you do differently because as well. So I look forward to continuing to learn from you, and when your book comes out, I'll obviously be reaching out and wanting to learn more, maybe bring you back on the show so you can share your new insights. But really appreciate your time today. Your messages that you have shared over the years, and especially today, are really important for anyone who is leading an organization, leading others, leading themselves through the process of change. And I just really appreciate you taking time today to explain the neuroscience, the brain, how it works, and how it's important for people to think about, not just know, but actually do differently too. So Melanie, thank you so much. If people want to follow you, find information that you put out into the world, what's the best way to do that? Where are you active?
You can certainly see me all over LinkedIn. And I do accept requests for connection. I also, as I do that, will connect you with things like the Change Capability Community. I will give you additional information. So just find me in LinkedIn, or you can always send me an email at melanie@agilechangemanagement.co.uk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time again, and have a great rest of your day.